Now, in what has been described as the biggest electoral show on earth, more than 600 million votes cast, makes ours look a bit poor by comparison. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been returned to power, leading the BJP to another 5 years of government. Often referred to as the Trump of South Asia, Modi looks set to comfortably win a majority of seats and continue his brand of right-wing nationalist leadership. The landslide victory comes despite months of cross-border airstrikes with Pakistan and rising tensions in Kashmir, as well as a slowing economy. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison congratulated Modi on his historic win, as did American President Donald Trump, one of a number of controversial world leaders, including Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, to embrace the Indian PM throughout his reign. But Indian politics has long been a fraught space with the proliferation of fake news across the country. This election was dubbed the battle for India's soul. So speaking freely about Indian politics remains something of a utopian dream.
I'm actually going to do an episode about the Indian election.
What?
Are you out of your mind?
You're being stupid now.
Indian elections are a definite no-no.
There is a lot of garbage outside, and that garbage is going to come on your face if you open your mouth on Indian politics.
You cannot talk about Narendra Modi. You cannot talk about Priyanka Gandhi.
You cannot talk out in the open.
What about on the internet?
Never on internet.
Democracy is for people with power, people with muscle power and money power. It is not for you and me.
It's for gangs.
You are going to make millions of people angry.
With the Hindus, with the Muslims, with the Sikhs.
They're going to kill you.
You will be no more.
There will be an accident. You will be burned to death. You're gone.
You can talk about anything else.
Talk about cricket.
Talk about sneakers.
That's more comical.
That's more comical.
Well, for more now, we're joined by CEO of Indian Link Media Group, Pawan Luthra. Nice to see you again, Pawan.
Nice to be here, Stan.
We can make light of it, and sometimes that's a relief. But there's no laughing matter in India. This idea of Hindu nationalism. Tell us about that and how that is playing out and how that played into Modi's election campaign and success.
Look, it was all about brand politics where India was concerned in these elections. Modi came into these elections after not succeeding in a few of his economic policies. When he went to elections in 2014, he talked about economic development, lowering the unemployment rate, and these things did not play out in the preceding 5 years. So come 2019, Modi had to think about what other ways can he get into the hearts and minds of the people. He was in a good position because there wasn't any effective opposition as it was. And Modi could build on the brand of the person, Narendra Modi. And if you look at that, that brand politics is something which is sweeping around the world. We have brand Scott Morrison, we have brand Trump, we have brand Putin, if that's one way of looking at it. So brand Modi positioned himself. So the whole narrative was that I am a strong person. I'm an alpha male person who can take strong decisive decisions. In fact, his Twitter handle was Chaukidar, which is a Hindi word for the watchman. So I will watch over you. I will be there to protect you. And I'll be there to take care of all your needs. So Chaukidar, and he gave up the Twitter handle after he won the elections.
I will make India great again, I suppose you could say, in a bumper sticker.
And keep you safe.
I've heard about this in the past, and it goes to this idea of nationalism in a country that is very diverse, and we know that sectarian tensions have been devastating in the past. This cow militancy. Tell us about that and how that plays into the idea of Hindu nationalism.
Look, in terms of the cow is very sacred to the Hindus, and they are adamant that nobody should eat beef. And obviously for the 200 million odd Muslims and Christians living in India, beef is a normal part of their diet. And the cow militancy came through saying the cows will not be killed. And there were some atrocities which happened in spite of the people who were set upon by the mob, saying that this is not cow meat, this is actually lamb or mutton or something else. But I think passions took over. So that was a big blot in the previous 5 years when there was some freedom given and a silent nod given by the ruling BJP party to assert the authority. But again, whether it's playing into the hands of I'm a strong, decisive leader, so I can turn a blind eye, and this is a Hindu nation, so I want that to play in politics. So That was a blot, and there was an expectation that the BJP or Modi would get punished in this election. But no, they actually have had more votes than they had in the 2014. In fact, it's not been Modi versus the Congress. It's been Modi 2014 versus Modi 2019.
And Modi 2014 was talking about the economy, as he'd done in Gujarat, which he'd turned the economy around when he was governor there. He comes to power saying that these will be great economic times. In fact, the economy, while still growing at around 6%, is slowing. So tell us about his stewardship of the economy, and if indeed it is not all it's cracked up to be, why people are rewarding him for this.
Well, in terms of where India is concerned, the Hindu rate of growth, which is often associated with the Indian rate of growth, is normally deemed to be about 7 or 8%. And if it dips below that level, it does create some economic disruptions. Think about it, inflation is quite high in India, so people need some basic growth to happen to feel richer, to get a better level of living. Now, Modi took a couple of financial and economic decisions which really hampered the economy. One was demonetization. One fine evening, he demonetized 2 of the widely circulated currency notes. It's something like
Can we just explain that? Because demonetisation meant that he removed this currency from circulation. Up around 80% of notes actually in circulation, is that right?
Let's assume that Prime Minister Morrison decides tomorrow that there is going to be an assault on the black economy or people who are hoarding money. And he says, as of tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, your $20 notes will not be accepted anyway and are totally invalid. That's demonetization.
And it didn't fix the problem that he said it would fix, which
It
is
didn't fix the
corruption.
problem because it's a cash economy. It created a lot of social upheaval, especially in the lower middle class families, especially a lot of women were saving monies, hiding it from their families so that they could spend it on their daughters and other things. And all of a sudden, they couldn't take this money anywhere. So demonetization was one aspect which slowed down the economy, because if money is not circulating around in the economy is not going to grow. And the second move was the introduction of a goods and services tax. India is a very complex country. So the number of states over there, the number of tolls, the number of taxes, the number of states you have to cross a border in, and the idea was to make it a little bit simpler. But before you make anything simpler, sometimes you have to create some level of disruption, and the mechanics to handle the disruptions were not there. So coming back to Modi, he introduced these 2 landmark changes in the economy, and the economy has not really recovered from there and has been stuck around the 6% mark. There's also the farming sector is about 50% of the economy, and there's a high level of unemployment in that sector. So the idea was that there needs to be more encouragement of jobs, creation of jobs to make things happen. And 5 years down the track, that hasn't happened. So there was a fair bit of agitation from the farmers and other people about the economy. And the idea was this will stick and hamper Modi. But Modi has been called the Teflon politician. This is something like if you go back to the 1980s, the US economy wasn't doing very well. Ronald Reagan was on the back foot. And he did not allow any of the economic downturn to stick to him. He moved on to other and better things. And Modi changed the narrative, prosecuted the argument that India needed somebody strong, somebody decisive, an alpha male. And people wanted somebody like that.
Claire, looking on at something like this, how much does this feed into, and Pawan's touched on this, but the narrative that we're seeing around the world now, where democracies themselves are being weakened not from the outside but from the inside, where the soft guardrails of democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, is playing into an arch nationalism and a populism where the alpha male, the authoritarian figure, is able to capitalise. When you look at what's happening in India, the biggest democracy in the world, what does it tell you about the concerns you may have for democracy more broadly?
It's an amazing turn of events, isn't it? That I think our natural assumption, particularly in places like China, is that as education increases and people move to the cities, and generally every family has someone who's working towards an education, that the general level of prosperity would rise and that democracy would follow. In India, we've got incredibly high rates of education, but highly educated people just can't get a job. You know, across the board, you know, there seems to be widespread unemployment and underemployment of highly educated people. So that's the frightening thing for me. That even in a population that is more highly educated than it's ever been, there is still this rejection of what we would think of as the fundamental tenets of democracy. It's amazing how Modi managed to mobilise Pakistan, you know, and turn a border skirmish essentially into a positive for him. Imran Khan said before the election that peace was more likely if Indians voted for Modi.
But why, sorry about that, but why are we challenging democracy? Because if I look at it, people had a free vote. They were given the presentations from the opposition and the incumbent president. They had the freedom to vote. 900 million people were eligible to vote. 667 million people did. Out of the 900 million, there was 438 million men, 462 million women, and there were 32,000 transgender people. So they were allowed to vote. They had the full right to exercise the democratic right. So perhaps this is what the people wanted. What's wrong in accepting?
I just mean that he was casting himself as an autocrat, really.
Yeah, but that's a fascinating point. And I'd like to go to you on this, Jamie, because yes, people do have the vote, and this is what people are saying they want, and this is what Donald Trump says as well. You know, look at this. I know what people want. People voted for me. In a sense, what some people see as populism as a bad thing can actually be democracy in work.
You know, I mean, I mean, apart from the fact that you know, the idea that so many hundreds of millions of people voted and it wasn't a violent sort of thing. I'm just sort of used to, you know, in the wake of elections and terrible things happen, this number of people went to the polls and voted. I think if that wasn't a greater exercise of democracy, I don't know what is. But I think that one of the things that when we look at populists and the sort of the rise of Trump, who spoke to a particular feeling and a particular segment of the people, took him into the White House. The mandate that Modi has now, what do you think he's going to do with that? And where do you think he's going to take the country? I mean, will it be more autocratic? And you know, and will he use that populist position to reinforce whatever it is that he wants to do? I mean,
or double down on Hindu nationalism.
That's the sort of the signals that I feel like he's sending now.
Well, if you're talking about nationalism, the question is, do you expect nationalism to be the brand India going forward? Would that be a normal norm in society? Hindu nationalism, not exactly. Why? Because I have enough confidence as an Indian Australian that the Hindu religion is a very accepting religion. It's a very diverse religion. It's been around for 5,000 years. There have been different times when different people have tried to brand it and make it just their religion. And there have been speed bumps along the way. If I go back to the early 1970s in India, we had the Indira Gandhi government, which was extremely strong, in fact, had wiped the entire opposition out in a couple of elections, and they were elected back-to-back, very much like Modi. And if I look at the 2019 elections, we hardly have anybody from the Congress party who has actually gone anywhere. So in terms of whether that's going to be a long-term problem for India, no. There are going to be a few skirmishes. There are going to be a few issues, yes. But the idea is, I think India as a country, Hinduism as a religion is far more stronger to be disrupted by one person.
Eddie, sorry, Jamie, could I just go to Eddie and bring you in on this? Looking on at this, and it's often said that India is a balance potentially to China's rise in the region and this authoritarian capitalism model from China versus a democracy that we share much in common with, and our values are the same, and we've been members of the Commonwealth. When you hear what Pawan has spoken about here and the concerns about Hindu nationalism and populism in India and potential even for conflict over the border with Pakistan, how do you work through this and look at where Australia sits and what Australia's interests may be?
Oh, well, I think, you know, any kind of talk or prospect of rising nationalism around any of the, you know, ethnicities or religious base is concerning, especially where we sit within our own neighbourhood. But, you know, as you've mentioned, Stan, with those relations with China and India as well, and the historic relationship. I was interested, I heard a fantastic program just recently with Philip Adams talking about the Indian election. He was talking about some elements that people might not realise, so being a fully electronic and, you know, their version of electoral commission, pretty much going door to door to ensure people were participating and having that vote. So as the guest has mentioned, the amount of women and men and others that were voting as well, and there were those parts, but then also there's equal kind of concern around those rising issues that you mentioned. And I have been thinking about, what does that mean for us, but also more locally in our own politics with our recent election and our Prime Minister being more openly religious as well, and the way that that conversation is starting to play out. And we've already started to see more conversations about the development of religious freedom of religious protection laws going ahead, and how that conversation is going to play out. So I'm not exactly sure, but I'm interested to see off the back of some of those greater international developments how that debate will continue to play out here much more locally, and then how that impacts on our relationships within the region too.
Just before we go on this, Carly, I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about, we've just had an election here where some have called it a Trump Brexit moment, probably not accurately, but we have seen divisions between the city and the country. We've seen underlying tensions and questions of religious freedom that Eddie mentioned there have percolated in this election as well. When you look at what India's just gone through and reflect on ours, how do you see the electoral process playing out? Maybe even what Australia can learn from this?
Yeah, I think in that clip that was played before Paola came on, there was a line that you're very privileged to have the freedom to speak about politics. And I think that, here in Australia, we're particularly privileged to be able to speak so openly about our differing views, whether we vote for who's in or who's out. And I think that we are very lucky to be able to express those things, and we shouldn't take that for granted, because so many of the people around the world can't voice their opinions apart from in elections.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you so much for that. Pawan, great to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for coming.
Nice to be here. Thank you.